Hello, good evening, and welcome to UPfront. My guest today is an extraordinary man. He's one of the few people you can quote and boldly quote because he has studied, thought, and actually knows Ghana's politics for more than 4 decades. Don't forget that, more than 4 decades. He is one man who's taught political science and is a distinguished emeritus professor of political science. Now, on the more controversial issue about decentralization and the quest to make political parties sponsor or field candidates and also elect DCs, he's an authority in the area. At least he sat in the Consultative Assembly. And if you don't know the Consultative Assembly, they gave us the current constitution that we have today. Ladies and gentlemen, after this break, you get to know who I'm talking about. You welcome back. This is UPfront. My name is Raymond Akwa. My guest is Professor Emeritus Kwame Akon Ninsen. People don't mention your Akon.
Because I deliberately hide it.
Oh, I see. Prof, I hope you are doing well.
I'm well.
I want to just drill down to the most important conversation for the day.
Yes.
I want you, mindful of your experience. We know that the current district assemblies we are having were established as far back as 1989, somewhere around that period.
Yes.
And they were transitioned into when we went into democratic governance in 92. You were on the Consultative Assembly.
Yes.
What was your job on the Consultative Assembly, and what entirely was the job of the Assembly itself?
Well, the Assembly, according to the establishment law, had the mandate to draft a new constitution for the country,
Okay.
borrowing on various sources.
So the 1992 Constitution, that's what we're talking about?
Yes.
You're part of those who drafted it.
Yes.
What specific role did you play in there? Were you just in a meeting of so many people, because we were told that market women were inclusive?
Well, the PNDC made it as representative as possible.
Interesting.
In contrast with earlier constitution-making bodies. You know, the PNDC prided itself for being a grassroots government, a government of the people.
I see.
You know, so its intention was to bring as many ordinary people
On board.
Yeah. They are representatives.
So it's not.
onto the
So
consultative.
there's no doubt that there were market women on board.
Oh, they were represented.
Okay, on this particular.
Artisans, market women, operators of Ghanaian restaurants,
Okay.
you know.
Did it affect the quality of the work?
Well, the quality of the work, I would say, was not affected by the representation, because it's not everybody who was making the relevant required input.
Okay, that's interesting.
And the assembly was structured in a way that it worked in committees, and people serving on committees were those who had expert knowledge
In those areas?
in those areas, more or less.
Which committee were you serving?
I ended up mainly on the Constitution and Legal Affairs Committee, which was chaired by Justice S.A. Brobe.
Oh, so the Justice Bobe Committee.
Yes,
Okay, that's what you were on. Constitution and Legal Committee.
yes.
I see. Now,
And it was basically the clearinghouse
oh, okay.
of the assembly. When any committee completed its work, it submitted
It to your committee.
to make sure that the structure, the language, everything was proper.
Now, I understand that the PNDC set up the National Commission for Democracy and Justice D.F. Annan of blessed memory. The mission of this NCD was to look at ways of formulating a program for the realization of what the PNDC called a true democracy.
Yes.
To be clear, this commission decided that the core mandate of the PNDC, or the core theme, giving power to the people, needed to be realized, and we needed to couch for ourselves some form of a system that reflected our image. So some of the things that I thought were important were that Ghana had some peculiar socio-cultural values, such as consultation, voluntary participation, consensus, and self-reliance. And these should represent keenly in our district assembly structure.
Yes.
Can you let us know how we came by the current district assembly system?
Well, as part of the PNDC's vision of transferring power to the people, making sure that nothing would henceforth be decided from the castle, but that the people would have the power to define their own future. In pursuit of that, the district assemblies were initiated and inaugurated in 88 or 89?
Yes.
You know, so that was it. The intention was to make sure that the people at the grassroots, in the rural communities, in the villages, would be able to decide on what was in their best interests.
And this was based on a rather disastrous post-independence history, that governments over the period had reflected more of what the elites wanted and not more of what the grassroots wanted. Was that it?
That more or less was the judgment passed on previous government by the PNDC, that it was elitist.
Okay.
You know, elitist. Even when we were conducting elections, and you know, the CPP government had also reformed the local government system.
Yeah.
And made it more representative than previous ones. But the PNDC regarded all such reforms as elitist, you know. So the decentralization movement initiated by that government was intended to break this cycle of elitist government, to ensure that the people at the grassroots...
Power to the people.
Yes.
They decide their future.
Yes.
And all that they wanted to do.
Well, if you have power in governance, if you have power, you can govern yourself.
So that's the idea behind what we currently have as a district assembly structure.
That was the thinking behind the district assembly system of government.
Was that right, at least historically?
Well, it was a move in the right direction, just that its implementation, since the coming into force of the 1992 Constitution, has been corrupted.
Really?
Yes.
Where did we go wrong?
We went wrong by vesting the appointment of the district chief executive in the president.
But it was your job to put it or not put it in the Constitution. It's Article 243.
We didn't realize that we're given the executive so much power.
Really?
Yes, it's amazing. I mean, if you review the Constitution and the amount, the quantum of executive powers, it's bizarre. You know, that one person, the executive president, should have so much power in governance, power to appoint almost the full range of public officers.
And add up the district heads too.
Yes.
Was there a particular thinking behind it?
Do you know that even the appointment of the, I think, 1/3 majority of the district assemblies had been taken over by the president?
Yeah.
There's no consultation with the chiefs.
But you put in there that they should consult the chiefs.
Yes, but the president doesn't consult the chiefs.
So why did he give the president so much power?
Why? That's a good question. That's a very good question. We thought we were going to run an executive system of government. You know, given our history of attempts to revolt, to separate one region from the nation and all that, and episodes of regional tribal dissent and rebellions. We thought we needed a strong center, a strong center to hold the nation together.
A tough figure as president.
Not necessarily a tough figure.
As in centralized power somewhere, somehow.
Somebody or a position which is endowed with enough power to hold the nation
together.
And what is, it was a bad decision. That's what I can say.
It was a bad one.
A bad one. Because we ended up, even the parliament now cannot control the executive.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and yet the Constitution vested Parliament with enough power
to do that
over its financial matters, over its appointment, and so forth. But Parliament has lost all that
because you allowed the president, who is all powerful, to equally appoint more than half of his ministers from the Parliament.
You know, I think it was during the PNP government that Parliament defeated or rejected the budget of the government.
Yeah, during the man's time.
You know, and we thought that was a recipe for disaster.
So to prevent that from ever happening again.
So the president should have reasonable representation
in the House.
We made a mistake.
That was also a mistake.
It was a mistake. Now everybody in Parliament, every member of the ruling party in Parliament wants to become a minister.
He's trying to catch the eye, not of the speaker, but of the president.
Ridiculous.
I see.
So, the president has arrogated so much power unto himself that these assemblies, as conceived and structured in the Constitution, are not working.
So, you think it's the powers of the president that's preventing from district assemblies from working?
It's, yes,
Largely.
primarily. Because the president is the source of public policy, the
Okay.
executive.
Okay.
You know, what the district assemblies need is effective fiscal decentralization, administrative decentralization, political decentralization.
Fiscal, that's money.
Money.
2, administration, that's control of the place. And political, how do you explain that? As in, the person who is heading it should equally be decentralized.
The political heads of the various ministries within the district assemblies should not be controlled from Accra, should be independent and responsible or accountable to
The district chief executive
the district chief executive or an authority
at
within,
the district level.
yes, within the district,
Perhaps the district assembly itself.
district assembly.
Now, this contention, but it looks like there's a difference between what you, the framers of the Constitution, thought will be the outcome of what we put together and what the reality on the ground currently is.
The reality is that our politicians, excuse me to use this word, are greedy. Our politicians are greedy. They want too much power.
It's greed. The problem is greed.
Greed. So they've tried to control the state, established institutions.
Okay. And in this case, you separate state from government,
It's the government which is doing that,
trying to control the state,
to control the state.
because they are independent institutions of state.
There are independent institutions of state, and there are provisions in the Constitution for the establishment of non-civil service bodies.
Oh, okay.
You know, non-civil service bodies. The president has, or the ruling party, has taken that power from parliament and is now establishing all manner of committees and boards. And parliament has lost its regulatory control over these bodies.
Now, let me get this straight. Is this just happening now, or throughout the Fourth Republic? This has been the problem.
It started from 1992 with the implementation of
the Constitution.
The moment the parties realized that if they won an election, they would control all power.
I see. But was that what we intended our political system to be?
It was embedded in the electoral system.
Not necessarily the political system.
The electoral system.
Okay, I get you. Now,
Can I explain that?
please do.
The winner takes all system.
Our electoral system is a winner takes all system.
Yes. So
I mean,
when
it's
you
first
win,
past the polls as compared to
it's the same thing.
the proportional representation.
Proportional representation, if we had implemented that, would be probably laughing all the way from our homes to Parliament House.
Really?
Yes,
It was a better system.
It's better, much better,
Much better.
much.
So why didn't you access to do that when he had the opportunity to put in the constitution?
We thought the winner takes all system would enable the government to function effectively,
I see.
you know. So the moment the political parties realized that with the majority in parliament, they have won a lotto, political lotto,
He can't do everything.
do anything they want to do using their majority in parliament.
In parliament. Now,
And-
yes, please.
And they took advantage of that to assert control over the state apparatus, from the judiciary through parliament itself to the public service and related institutions, down to the district assembly level.
So it's a complete capture.
Capture, state capture, yes.
You make it look like we've gone from good intentions to a hopeless situation.
To a difficult situation.
I see.
It's difficult. It's not hopeless. It's just difficult. It's difficult because we have the power as a people to amend the Constitution.
I'll come to that. Now, currently, some of that is happening. I'm sure you deem this as good news that Parliament is currently amending Article 243 and making it possible for us to elect our district chief executives. Good news, right?
Yes.
Very good news. But already, some are saying that it requires other constitutional amendments to make it full and complete. You believe in that too?
Yes. Yes. There are, excuse me, related articles. I haven't read my constitution for a long time, so
That's
but there are related articles which should be amended
alongside 243,
to
which
ma-
allows election.
yeah, to make sure that the district chief executive, when elected, could operate independently.
For example, you can't have a district chief executive whose budget is held up, reviewed, and decided in Accra.
Through the regional minister.
That's true. Now, but this is an argument the NDC is currently making, that it will be useless to just go for 243 amendment and think that merely because you've made the position of district chief executive elective, it solves the problem. Do you think it is a reasonable argument?
We've addressed this problem already. If, for example, the district chief executive is elected without commensurate power or powers over finance, over the bureaucracy of the district assembly,
Okay.
for example, he's free, but not yet free.
As in, he'll be constrained in the performance of his duties.
He's constrained. No money, not probably the administrative means to formulate and implement policies is still weak. You know, right now I understand that the Ministry for Education has been sufficiently reasonably decentralized.
As in, district education directors are
Yes.
basically in charge of their districts.
Yes. But how powerful are they, or how effective are they in terms of policy?
I see.
How effective are they?
Mm.
The GES, is it?
Ghana Education Service.
Ghana Education Service. I don't know whether the districts have corresponding offices, you know, and how much control over policy or how much input into policy they can make.
Actually have. Now, let me get this clarified. The question about the election of the MMDCs, there seems to be a general clamor for it in the country. However, there's contention over whether or not the government's question, and the question here is the district assemblies, should they be allowed to, should political parties be allowed to field and support candidates in this case? What was the intention behind 55(3) of the Constitution, which barred political parties from fielding and supporting candidates at the district level? What was the intention behind it?
The intention is rooted in the PNDC, the principles underlying the PNDC Act, Decentralizing Government, so that the people will be able independently to choose their representative and hold them accountable.
Not on partisan basis.
Not on partisan basis.
And is that rationale still relevant today?
It is important if we could do that, but the intrusion of partisan politics has gone on so much, so deeply, that it's difficult to conduct district level elections without the participation of the parties.
At least now they don't do it openly, they hide it.
Right from the first election, I remember that clearly. Political science conducted a study of the district level elections. I think it was in 1994. The evidence was quite clear that the parties were secretly and quietly sponsoring candidates.
So they didn't even wait for the first
They
election.
did.
Right from the beginning, the law has been abused.
The right to free and fair election at the grassroots had been compromised.
Right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning. So it's going to be very difficult to dissociate district level elections from the influence of political parties.
Two things. So is it then worth the try if we decide that, why don't we just remove the constitutional impediments and let them participate? Is that argument tangible to you? So instead of hiding, let them come out openly.
That's what we are intending to do with these constitutional amendments.
Yes. Do you think it's worth it?
It's worth it, but it will take a long time to fully manifest itself as grassroots elections which are conducted independently of the center.
Oh, okay. So first, the district assembly concept is basically do things at the grassroots level.
Yes.
Independent of the center.
Yes.
But if you make it partisan, you are merely replicating what's at the center at the local level.
It needs not be so, especially when the people will retain power, the power of accountability
Okay.
over their representatives.
So explain to me how it's possible, or what are the benefits of having the parties being involved, sponsoring and fielding candidates at the lower levels?
You know, the parties are very powerful instruments of mobilization to organize the people at the grassroots and get them to act. So they will perform this role at the grassroots if legally allowed to do it.
I see.
And they do it more effectively.
Mobilization.
Mobilization.
Is that one of the virtues of decentralization?
The major principle of decentralized politics, decentralized election, is the autonomy of the citizen at that level to act at the political level, i.e. elect, participate in the policy process, demand accountability, and so forth and so on.
And can this be enabled by having the political parties putting up candidates?
If the parties are organized in a manner that concedes a measure of autonomy to their grassroots branches.
Are they currently?
If I said if.
Okay, Prof. I understand that.
Yes.
But are they currently? You have a better appreciation of how political party systems work in this country.
The intrusion of money, has again colored the extent of integrity of politics at the grassroots, because even the choice of or nomination of polling station representatives of the political parties tends to be influenced by money.
Yeah, that's true.
Which means that the choices that the grassroots voter makes are not independent choices. They are
Now,
influenced.
So we've established that their choices are not independent choices. Does it mean by the sequence that you just showed us that because their choices are not independent choices, having to allow political party involvement at the grassroots, it's not a very positive thing to do?
We are evolving as a nation. And that's why our political party organizations have so much problem.
Okay.
So it's likely that the next generation of politicians, of citizens, would grow up being jealous of their independence at the grassroots.
So,
And being able, therefore, to act independently of the national political party.
as we speak today, do you think is the right way to go? Open up, let parties field candidates. Is the right way to go?
It is. Because whether we like it or not, it's happening. Political parties are interfering at the grassroots level when it comes to district level elections. So formalizing the process is important in several ways. It introduces transparency into grassroots politics. You know, which means that parties could now openly canvass for votes or organize their branches at the grassroots.
How about the fear that this is the poison politics at the top is being transposed to the bottom?
American politics was so corrupt at the grassroots. Big money people were manipulating the new immigrants, you know, to get their votes. But today, American politics is not what used to be maybe 100 years ago.
That's interesting.
It is informative and assuring that as we evolve, we will not evolve backwards.
You believe that?
Oh, yeah.
From your experience in Ghana's political trajectory, do you think we've gotten better?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Our parties are being better organized, though corrupt.
Still corrupt.
But they are better organized. And my point is that with time, the citizen who is vulnerable to the attraction of money will emerge, will grow into maturity. Yes. So our politics can only get better.
So if I glean from what you're saying, you are a yes person. Yes for political parties, active involvement and fielding of candidates on the ground.
Well, theoretically, yes.
Is there a difference between a theory and a practical?
You can have a theory without practice. Of course, that's being hypocritical in a way.
Interesting.
But I believe that allowing political parties to get involved in grassroots politics, electoral politics, is it's going to be good for the country.
Prof, I'm asking you to hold on. I'll
Yes.
take a break. When I come back from the break, we'll continue this conversation on our front. Well, folks, my guest is the distinguished Professor Kwame Nenseng. After this break, we would continue decentralization, but also more importantly, he has written on the grassroots problem of this country, corruption, and how he thinks we are not tackling the actual roots. We'll deal with that after the break. Welcome back. This is Upfront. My name is Raymond Alqua. And Upfront today, my guest is one of those who put together the current 1992 Constitution. He's a distinguished political sciences. He's taught it for more than 4 decades, or within that particular period. His name is Professor Emeritus Kwame Akon Nenseng. Prof, you're welcome back.
Thank you.
We just left off on your yes vote. We just left off on your endorsement of the yes vote. And the interesting part is that, of course, I mean, you are one of those who put together a constitution. You don't believe that that position that was maintained prior to going to the Fourth Republic and thinking that we could devolve politics at the grassroots of partisan. You don't even think that it happened in the first place, because you see that in the 1994 District Assembly elections, it was purely partisan on the ground.
It was. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting. So we conceived of something. The real implementation never happened. It never went the way we thought it would go. Now, I want us to move beyond this. I want you to be able to help me out. There are so many people who have complained that our district assembly concept is a complete failure. It's not working. We basically have centralized power and on the ground. Everything that ought to be done, for example, contracts for sweeping towns are done in Accra. Contracts for collecting the garbage is done in Accra. Contracts for spraying and fumigation is signed, sealed in Accra. Sometimes the people don't even know the contractors to be able to follow up some of these things. What can we do to improve our current district assembly system?
Well, the examples you cited relate to the corrupt disposition of our political elite.
Okay.
You know, because if the contract is signed here under their gaze, what should accrue to them will accrue to them.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
What should accrue to them will not disappear. They will make sure that it accrues to them. Whether it's 5%, 10%, I don't know the percentage these days.
The last time they checked that 10%. I don't know if it's increased. Of course, I mean, we know inflation and other things sometimes affect these things.
Yeah. So, and two, the district assemblies themselves don't have the administrative capacity to handle some of these matters.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So, to get back to your question, I don't think, or your concern, I don't think that the district assemblies have failed.
If not.
They haven't. They haven't. They are trying to discharge functions or a mandate to the best of their capacity. You know, if you go to the educational
Sector you
sector,
referenced earlier. Yes.
you know, for example, you know, there's no way you could ignore the district director of education
Okay.
and go to the regional office.
Yeah, you need to go through the process anyway. That's allowed.
Also, the recent rains, at least talking from the experience of my birthplace, 2 bridges were washed away.
Okay.
On the main road, the latest report I received says that they have started repairing
These bridges.
Yeah. The initiative could not have come from the minister or Ministry for Roads and Highways in Accra or whatever, feeder roads. It could have come from the district assembly.
That's an interesting development. Now,
also the building of schools.
mostly, yeah.
Basic schools.
It's the prerogative.
Yeah.
There's a bigger question, and this bigger question you seek to address in your book. What is the biggest problem with our country today? From where you sit. Some say our political system is completely on its head. Others say we bought into democracy we didn't understand, so we are struggling to perfect one for ourselves. There's also the school of thought that the system is being perverted with corruption so much so well that we don't seem to know what we are running as a political system. You are a political scientist at the core. What is the problem with our system?
I'm a fisherman at the core. Yes. Corruption plays, plays a part, and a very subversive part in our governance. Whether democratic governance or authoritarian governance, corruption distorts and weakens the system. So it's important to address the problem of corruption if we want our system of governance to become efficient and effective, you know. And to do that will require some reforms, some reforms in the starting with the Constitution. Oh, I just talked about the excessive, excuse me, powers of the president.
That's true.
Okay. That has to change. And the power exercised by the government to establish committees, commissions, boards, and so forth and so on, which the Constitution vests in Parliament.
I mean, are you talking about commissions for inquiry?
No.
Generally commissions, committees.
Committees, boards, for example, you establish a company, SNIT,
Yeah.
and you set up a board, the
Yeah.
SNIT board. The president sets up that board
Yeah. Appoints people.
and appoints people from the board chairman to the messenger. Even though the messenger may not be appointed directly,
By the president.
the president's agents there.
That's the appointment.
You know. The Constitution vests this power to establish boards and committees in Parliament, and it further mandates it to periodically, I think annually, review their mode of operation to ensure that they operate
functioning
democratically.
So how come we've always had the central government doing this job? Appointing these board members and all of that.
You mean the executive?
Executive, yes.
That's to enable them to misappropriate public funds. Yes.
Does this affect the independence of these institutions?
Of course, they are not independent. If they were independent, they would not compromise their integrity.
Okay. So a perfect example is the Auditor General saying that my board chairman is impeding my work. He's pursuing some other interest different from what I'm supposed to be doing in this particular duty. Of course, this Auditor General, perhaps the one in a very long time who asserts independence, surcharges people, takes them before courts and all of that. He is the only person who's actually surcharged a sitting senior minister.
Yes.
In office.
Yes.
But he fears his board is undermining his work.
Yes.
And now he fears the IOCO, another state institution, is undermining his work.
If we should trace the authority of IOCO to undermine the work of the Auditor General, you'll see where the line will take us to. Probably beyond the chairman of the board of the, what do you call it?
EOCO.
No.
The audit service.
Audit service. Probably beyond that board, the chairman of that board.
Okay.
You know. So the fact that we are the executive rather is appointing chairpersons and board members of such critical institutions is a recipe for extensive corruption.
I see. But we've not sought to fix that problem in any way. We've not said that, oh, well, let's devolve this power. Let's take it away. Let's take it away from the president. Also because it's the power that's in charge that can do some of these things. Because ordinary people cannot take away political power. It is the people in politics that can do so. Is there some conspiracy or agreement among our political elites to do these things?
More or less. More or less.
Because MPP and they both do the same thing. I mean, they've not had a quest to change it. None of them have said, okay, no, I'm not going to do this because it should not be mine. They all agree to doing these things.
They are complicit. Yes. Because the system favors them.
That's true.
It enables them to control the state machinery and appropriate resources for themselves. Not only cash, funds, but even state lands.
Yes.
State lands.
Yeah, it's happening.
Real estate belonging to the state. You'll be amazed by how freely they share these resources among themselves, especially on the eve of their departure from power. So, if you want any change to occur, then the system, at least this aspect of the executive power, vis-a-vis parliament's power, should change.
Appointment of boards.
And corporations.
And corporations. Now, in February, you launched a book, The Corrupt Elites.
Yes.
The Anatomy of Power and Health and Wealth in Ghana. This is a 191-page book. It centers on the rise of corruption within successive historical conjectures and also questions and answers the Ghanaian pre-colonial, colonial, and colonial states and their mutually interrelated political processes. There's an important question here. What is the source of the corruption in the country? What's the root of it? Where should we be tackling?
Well, human beings are by nature I'm thinking of a word that I picked from one of our senior professors, Professor Baita. He had been called by the PNDC government to address an assembly of militants or cadres of the revolution. And it was on the occasion of the visit of the head of the Sandinista revolution. Professor Baita, that's the name, religion, I think was the chairperson. And he said, don't mind all these people. They have an instinct to steal money.
Innate quest for corruption.
Yes,
Okay.
to steal money. you know. So the point I'm making is that human nature, though they may not steal all the time, would like to acquire. And if it's difficult to acquire wealth, you may be tempted to
Take it
steal.
by force. Okay. That's interesting to know. Yeah.
Yes. So it's the excessive expression of this human instinct that leads to corruption in all societies.
So how do we deal with the roots?
Where the institutions work effectively, and that's the main argument of the book.
Okay.
Where the institutions work effectively.
In this case, institutions of state.
Yeah, public institutions.
Okay.
In the economic, political, social, cultural fields.
Okay.
The Minister for, is it Culture and Religious Affairs or something?
Yeah, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs.
Says the government is going to set up a certain body which will audit the accounts of churches. You see, you watch the governing body of this, what is it called? This body, this new institution that may be set up, will determine whether that institution would audit the churches dispassionately.
Okay.
Or not.
Okay. So is the body that will determine whether or not they will deliver their work or not?
It's composition.
Basically, Martin Amidi is our special prosecutor. What do you think about the Office of Special Prosecutor?
If you can catch the corrupt people, if you can catch the corrupt people and get the courts to jail them, he's going to succeed. Otherwise, for example, the procurement authority, public procurement authority. What has happened to the case involving, was it the chief executive officer of, what has happened?
The Procurement Authority?
Yes.
We are told it's been investigated.
It's being investigated.
Yes.
How long?
For some time now, they've still been at it. But there's a new person who's basically acting in his stead.
Okay. You mark it on the wall. Within a year, that case will die.
Wow.
Yes, so many of those cases have died.
Happened, yeah.
It's because the institutional framework within which public officers work are not designed to ensure justice, transparency, and integrity.
What can this government do differently?
Like all the other political elites, if they will be magnanimous and initiate critical changes, amendments to the Constitution,
They can function.
they will be making a headway. Next, if they will agree with that same spirit to change the electoral system from the winner takes all of first past
the post.
system to a kind of proportional representation, we'll be making a headway, because proportional representation will enable other political parties to gain representation in parliament, especially other interest groups. Women, for example, could organize and put their representatives there.
Okay, that's interesting.
You know, other minorities could do that. So the moment you have a plurality of interest groups within parliament, those different representatives will not be easily bought over by the ruling government.
I get your point. Now, my final question to you before we end this. This question is about the current brouhaha. Has it ever happened before that the House of Chiefs are divided over a matter that's of national interest? So one side says, vote no. The other side says, vote yes. Is that division a sign of some retrogression within the House?
No, no.
You don't think so?
I think that the more divergent views we have,
Okay,
the better
I see.
for this country. So that groups' interests within the House will be compelled to dialogue,
More.
to reach consensus on important national issues.
Is our democracy working?
It depends on how you define democracy.
The current one that Ghana is practicing.
What is it?
Oh, I before you is not qualified to define anything.
Oh, it's been defined
Yes.
right from the inception
Brilliant.
of the life of the 1992 Constitution.
Yeah. Is it?
Kebi.
Yeah.
That is our notion of democracy.
Is it working?
Oh, yeah.
Just for the purposes of Kebi.
Well, if that's our understanding,
Okay.
then it's working. Alternatively, they will say, oh, this is like chieftaincy. No single chief stays in power for
Forever.
life. At one point, he should get out.
For another one to go in.
And that's what is happening. So, to the extent that there is alternation of power, we are being democratic. Two, the extent that we have freedom of speech, there is democracy. The extent that we have media freedom, which is very controversial, we have democracy, and so forth and so on. So within the parameters that we've defined for ourselves, democracy is working to some extent.
Are the parameters enough to ensure development of the country? Because that's the end inside, or the end benefit.
Not quite, because the rules are not always working efficiently and effectively. There's a lot of inefficiency and dishonesty in implementation of policy.
Prof,
Yes.
I wish we could continue this conversation for a very long time.
Yes.
But I think we can do it some other time and more often as you may be able to do so. But for now, thank you so much for giving us some time and your thoughts on these matters. We appreciate it very, very well.
It's a pleasure.
Well, folks, my guest has been Professor Kwame Akon-Nensen. He's a distinguished emeritus professor of political science. I hope you enjoyed it.